Hey there, it's David Duford again from Final Expense Agent Mentor at feagentmentor.com, and today we're going to talk about the fourth step in my four-part series of how to deliver a final expense burial insurance presentation. And to many agents, this fourth step is the most important, but to me, it's the least important. So let me explain. So the fourth step to any sales process is how to handle objections and how to handle rebuttals when you go to ask for the sale, the close of the sale. So what we're going to do, we're going to talk about the close. The close is very simple, and then we're going to get into the objections and rebuttals. But I must preface before we go any further beyond the close is this: any kind of objections, rebuttals, any issues that you get after you ask for the business, what you must understand as a salesperson is that a skilled salesperson designs a presentation so that the most common objections will be handled way ahead of time. They'll be, how do we say, pre-qualified, so that when they do ask for the sale, it's natural, effortless, and really doesn't result in much objections. As a salesperson, if you look back to the objections that you experience, no matter what you really sell, you will probably find a common thread amongst them. And what you need to do is figure out, how can I address this in the beginning versus at the very end, when stakes are high and thoughts run extremely emotional. You want to figure out, how do I talk about this from the beginning, asking the tough questions. And just as importantly, you want to be able to, again, address those points as quickly as possible, preferably in the pre-qualification stage. So let's talk about the close. The close is the most simplest aspect of this business. Again, assuming you follow my step-by-step procedure in selling final expense, the close is very simple. Once I know their trial close, they know they need it, they've told me they need it, like I explained in the third video, I find the company we're going to qualify for. I've already got their budget that they've told me they're comfortable with way ahead of time. And then what I do is I set them up and show them which company they're going to qualify for. I explain to them why I'm selecting this company amongst the many that I have. Usually it's because it's the best pricing combined with the best value of coverage, considering their health. And then I present to them 3 prices and 3 face amounts, all within the range or close to it that they described that they could afford. I write that on a clean sheet of paper on the lead card that they sent back. Once I write those 3 prices down, I pass it along to them, and I explain to them, here's what we can do for the price range you told me you were comfortable with. My recommendation would be the one that's going to fit your budget the best. It's always the one that you feel is not going to cause you duress and stress. You want to pick the one that's easily affordable. So out of those 3 choices, Mrs. Jones, which one do you feel works best for you? That's it. That's my close. It doesn't get any more complicated than that. It is assumptive. It's one of the few assumptive phraseology I use in my presentation. But if they're to that point, they're going to buy, and my mindset is they will, because I can rationally deduce that because of everything I've done prior to that. The pre-qualification, presenting, trial close, they're going to buy. And so I ask them with confidence which they would prefer, and then they pick one. And that probably happens about 80% of the time that I get to that point. Remember, I don't present and I don't do a full presentation on every call. I only present the people who are very pre-qualified, that I've asked all the tough questions already. So that way I know I'm dealing with somebody who's actually a prospect. So it's very important to understand, in the sense that when I talk to somebody, I ask the close, I get my sales about 4 out of 5 times when I'm at that point. It's not foolproof. Just like everybody else, I experience objections and rebuttals. But again, now that we're going to move and transition into the objections and rebuttal point of the conversation, my my main shtick here, again, is before you think too hard and too detailed about how to rebuttal objections, understand this. You have got to lay the ground rules down and make sure that your presentation handles all the potential objections that come up. And I'll tell you, what you need to do as an agent is basically determine that A, most objections consist of price, coverage, and need. That's really where all of it is. And then also things like trust. Do they like you? Those are all factors in someone deciding to buy today, and urgency. So you have to think through your sales process to make sure that you deliberately make a point out of all of those and take the time to clarify why they've got to be, why they're non-issues way ahead of time. So that's my spiel there. So let's talk about how to handle objections and how to rebuttal effectively. My approach is very simple and straightforward. If I get an objection, you need to isolate that objection and fan out the objection and figure out if there's any other objections. Once you isolate that objection, then you go to work on trying to reduce, marginalize in a constructive sense and show the prospect why that's not really a concern. Coming to some kind of compromise so that that prospect will hopefully buy something. So most commonly what you hear, if you follow my method, there's going to be two different kinds of objections you'll hear. You'll hear the let me think about it objection, and then the I need to talk to my kids objection. Many times they're both smoke screens because they're really just not dead set yet on buying anything, and because they're not sure if they can afford it. But you have to take the time to make sure you don't presume to know everything and follow the sequence of questions that I'm about to go through. So when somebody says whatever, I reiterate it to make sure I'm clear. I show appreciation that I respect their belief, and then I always ask, how do you mean? So for example, if someone says, let me think about it, I'm going to say, okay, so what you're saying is you just need some time to kind of mull this over and make a final decision, correct? Yes. Okay. And that's fine. I can totally appreciate that. I know I'm the kind of person that just doesn't rush into anything and spends my money. But I'm curious, how do you mean when you say you need to think about it? And then I shut up. I don't say anything. So this gives them the opportunity to clarify what that means. Because a lot of times, again, people don't want to upset you. They just want to, they just really need to think it over, and if they really need it or if they really can afford it. 90% of the time, it's affordability. That's where most objections lie, if you're assuming you're trustworthy. So, hopefully they'll say something like, well, I don't know really at this time if this is a good idea. I've got my budget, I've got this, I got that, financially, that I'm just concerned about. So then after I hear that, I ask them, okay, so you're just, bottom line is it's just the price, right? You're just concerned about the money. Yeah, I really am. Okay, Mr. Prospect, besides the price, is there any other reason that it's causing you not to make a decision today? So then they say, well, no. That's pretty much it. That's the only concern I have. Okay. So let me ask you this, Mr. Prospect. If there was, when I get that, I've isolated the objection. And so at that point, I go to work on the pricing. And usually what I do is that I just assume it is too expensive. I don't try to berate them or beat them up or soften them up to keep the same price. I just take a stab at a lower price point and try to logically justify and emotionally justify why something is better than nothing. This is what I would call the something is better than nothing clause whenever I hear a price concern. I tell them, listen, Mr. Prospect, most people I see are just like you. They care about their family, they don't want them paying out of pocket, and they're all on a fixed income, just like I said earlier. And what I've realized is that the last thing you want to do is take out a plan that you cancel in 6 months, right? Why would you want to do that? That's clearly the problem here. So what do people do in situations where they can't afford what they'd really like to have? Well, have you heard the term, something is better than nothing? Oh yeah, of course you have. And that is so true when it comes to life insurance. Let me ask you this. Would you rather your son have nothing Or would you rather your son have 5,000? What would be better? Of course, the 5,000 is going to be better. You see, right now you're looking at 10,000. Clearly, that's what you need to bury you. But that doesn't mean 5,000 isn't important or less coverage isn't important. So we can take this price from $50 a month for 10,000 down to $25 a month for 5,000. That way, you get started with something. You're fully covered for a part of the bill, and you can add to this down the line. Maybe in a year or two, I'll come back to see you. We'll sit down, reanalyze things, see if we can lock in a better price. But you met with me for a reason, and you sent this card in because obviously you have not only curiosity about how it works, but concern. You're telling me you need insurance. You know you need it. Why don't you just start with something small? What do you think about that? So that's how I take that situation and try to morph it into a compromise. One that weaves together the logical reason to have more, but also the emotional reason. And, you know, you could add a story in there about, you know, somebody dying with even a little bit made all the difference to the prospect. You know, those things like that help too. So that's a great way to handle the pricing objection. The second one, most common we'll hear, is the I need to talk to my kids objection. It is the most effective objection out there. It's the toughest to get around. Many times it's a smokescreen. Many times it's serious. And what we're going to address is a smokescreen. If they say I need to talk about it with my kids, the same script applies. So you just need to run this by your children and get a thumbs up or thumbs down on it, right? Yes. And that's fine. I can understand that. You know, your kids, this is something that they will be involved in. You want to make sure that they're a part of the process too, right? Yeah, absolutely. Well, so let me ask you this. So before I leave you with this information, is there any other reason besides talking with your children that you need to hesitate? No, I just need to run it by the kids. So what you're saying is you're totally comfortable with the price, the coverage, you can completely afford this 100%. You're just looking for their tacit approval. So you're giving them the opportunity to say no to that, because then if they say no to that, then there may be a pricing concern and maybe they want to get their kids involved. But if they say yes to that and they're saying yes all along and they seem engaged and genuine in the process, then what I'll tell them is, listen, look, I totally understand. I just want you to understand something. I drove about an hour and a half to see you today. I'm very busy. I have 10 more people to see today and 20 more people to see this week. I won't be back here after today. But I respect the fact you got to talk to your daughter or your children and get some input. You're telling me everything works for you. You know, obviously you see the benefits of doing what we're going to do. So here's my proposal. Let's take the application. Let's get the underwriting started so that we can approve you. We don't need money today. We'll start it next month. That way I can walk out with the application in hand. You can talk to your kids. I'm going to leave you a bunch of information that you can either talk to them over the phone or review with them about. If they have a problem, you've got my number. They are more than welcome to call me. If they talk to you and you don't feel like you need it, or they don't feel like they need it and you want to call and cancel, that's fine too. You know, I'm not here to pressure you into anything, but I want you to understand I don't have the time to come back to do this, because what I find is if somebody really wants this, they'll take it because they understand the importance. I think that's who you are. But if you're not interested, you can tell me that too. You can tell me no, and that's quite okay. So can we do this today, or do you really feel like you don't really need this? So, you know, what the process there is, let's compromise. You know, let's get you approved. If they agree with everything here, and everything, they're on board with every little bit, then and if they're engaged in the process, and they trust you and like you, but they really need to review this with their kids, they will compromise. You know, if you come off as trustworthy when you tell them that they can call and cancel and we'll take care of it, they'll believe you, and they'll do it. And then you can close the book on it and move on in your life. But the thing is that if they hedge and they do it, and there's something more to it, and they already lied to you. And this brings me to the last point in my presentation, and it's this. There are people, you won't close everybody in this business. If you have a 25% application to lead ratio, you're an awesome salesperson. You can make a great living in this business just off of a 25% close ratio. So, but you're not going to close 75% of them. Some of them won't have any need, any urgency, or any money. But there's a portion of those people that are just so deceptive, that are deadbeats and liars, that they will string you along because they don't have the character to just tell you that they just can't do it for whatever reason. And they're just that kind of weak-willed person. And so, you know, my whole logical rationalization that I make out of this is that if I've been honest and forthcoming this whole time, I've answered and rebutted honestly with these people, I've been positive and trustworthy, and they can't be honest with me after they told me otherwise the entire time, they're going to be deceptive no matter how many objections and rebuttals that you give. And if they do buy, they're going to wake up the next day and they're going to can you, and you're going to get a chargeback. And all this time and effort you expended on these deadbeats, really over moot points that shouldn't be an issue for a real buyer, is going to kind of make you a cynic in this business. And so you really have to understand that the buyers that buy because it's not rocket science. They know they need it. They've seen other loved ones die without it. And you found them something that fits and that makes sense, that it's the best plan, and they buy. There's no pressure to buy from the first day if it makes sense and they want it, like it, need it, and trust you. When the people want to hesitate and drag their feet, they're not really engaged. They don't have the urgency. And that's one of those things that happens that's hard to catch. They will string you along and they will cause you a lot of stress and duress. But you've got to identify that if you rebuttal a couple times and they still really aren't telling you really anything factual or concrete, they're deadbeat agent killers, and you got to just move on and tell them off and get out of there. For example, I had a client off of a seminar lead I did. This guy had talked to Lincoln Heritage, Senior Life, and some other broker, and you know, he didn't buy from any of them. And I asked him why, and he said, well, you know, their price is high, or they made me wait 2 years. And I said, okay. You know, and I said, well, if we can find you a plan that will be better priced and will cover you, would you be willing to do business? He said, yeah, I think so. So I noticed there he didn't say yes. He qualified it, I think so. That's kind of gives him a little out there. I should have hit him harder, because going through the presentation, he agreed with me. He did everything he was supposed to. And we get down to the sale, and he needs to think about it. What do you need to think about, Mr. Prospect? You know, how do you mean? Oh, I just need to think about it. I said, well, do you feel like you got this price is good for you? Yeah, I think so, but I still need to really give this some thought. And I asked him, I said, well, you've seen 3 agents. What's causing you the problem to not make a decision with anybody? And he just wouldn't tell me the truth. And that's the point, is that this guy had every characteristic of somebody who would listen, but he's really a deadbeat loser. And I say that with love, of course, but as you go through this business, you'll deal with these people that just aren't honest individuals. And I realized that this guy's like that. And we even called him back, and he said, I'm ready to go, I'm ready to do this. And I called back, and he says, I told the guy, no, I'm not interested. No, you didn't. You lied to me. So, again, the problems with prospects in some cases, you need to know that some people you just got to let go, because they will drive you nuts and frustrate you. And if you don't identify that quickly, then you will deal with a lot of problems, and it will really frustrate you. So, concluding the objection, closing, rebuttal process to the business, long story short, please take the time to answer the objections before they become verbalized, because every prospect has a series of questions they need to get answered before they make a decision. And understand that this business is not selling vacuums. The client has every option every single day to wake up and cancel your policy because for whatever reason. And that advance commission you get goes back and gets refunded for the one portion